Hi, welcome to Lean Blog Interviews. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is Darren Walsh, the author of the book, Making Lean and Continuous Improvement Work, A Leader's Guide to Increasing Consistency and Getting Significantly More Done in Less Time. So before I tell you more about Darren, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Excited to talk to you about your experiences and the book. We'll see if we can get significantly more conversation done in the
No
time that
problem.
we have available. I think we'll have a high quality discussion, not just a productive one. But let me tell you a little bit more again about Darren Walsh. He has a master's degree from the Lean Enterprise Research Center, highly acclaimed and well-known center in Cardiff, Wales. He's a director and a leadership coach at Making Lean Work Limited, a leading management consultancy. He specializes in helping business leaders unlock the transformative power of continuous improvement. So we'll talk about today. And he has over 25 years of experience in many industries, including automotive, aerospace, medical devices, energy, and financial services. So I like to ask people, Darren, before we talk about the important topics of the book and talk about the book, to get to know you a little bit better, what's your lean origin story? Does automotive come first in the bio because that's where you got introduced to lean like a lot of people,
Uh,
or tell us your story?
yeah, it really it was. I started in IT, believe it or not. I was
Mm.
an apprentice in IT, working at a manufacturing company. There was no full-time job there for me, and I got offered a role in production engineering. First I said yes, but I wasn't sure what production engineering was, and that was in an electronics business. It wasn't long after getting into the role, my quality manager had an influence on me. He shared with me, it was what it was the it was a Welsh government or the Department of Trade and Industry, a business book at the time, which featured the gurus, the quality gurus, Deming, Duran,
Mm. Mhm.
Taylor, and I just got it right into that. And right at the back was this pretty looking fella, Shingo. And I just devoured that. That was just fantastic. And before long, I was reading the works of Shingo at home. I went from electronic company to another electronics organization, but this time as an industrial engineer. So it
Mhm.
really just fine-tuned into improvement activity. Got mentored there by Dr. Kato, Richard Kato, a Japanese consultant brought in from Sony. I was worked with him for about 12 months. He spoke very little English, so he used to point and draw. And
Yeah.
yeah, I had a real great upbringing there. Went from there, spent a number of years there trying to squeeze out 1-2% in high volume industry to an organization, Sega, more project organization. And
That's the video game company.
yeah, I was on the sexy side. So I was on the same company, but I was on the sexy side. So
Okay.
the driving games, the motorbikes, the beat 'em ups. Yeah. And I would work on new product development, leaning out how are the people going to build, how are the team members going to build the product, lean it
Yeah.
out, put the systems in, teach the managers how to improve. And while I was there, that was one of my challenges was I would be working on a new project and they'd go back to one of the business units and I used to scratch my head. Why is the cleanliness, the 5S degrading? Why is the performance degrading? Why aren't the meetings working as they should be? So that's when I found out about lean and I got myself enrolled at the Masters in Cardiff, went from Sega to Boston Scientific, 3,500 people in one plant, so drove lean across the plant there. And then I went on to Parker Hannifin, so 11 sites in Europe. Then after that, Zodiac Aerospace division lean role there again, and then a GM role in oil and gas. So
Okay. Well,
it was really Parker was more automotive mixture. Yeah.
so, I mean, as we talk about so often here on the podcast, it goes to show that the ideas and the concepts and the methods or the philosophy, whatever words you want to use,
Hmm.
are highly transferable. Yeah, I'm curious, your experiences of coming into a new setting where, let's say, after automotive, coming into oil and gas. So, was there
Mm.
defensiveness about saying, well, what we do is different. We're not producing discrete products. This is different.
Yeah.
How do you get past that challenge?
I think that question came up and that comment came up every time that I went into a new business environment where I had a proper job that was, and since
Yeah.
then working as a management consultant. Yeah, so it's mainly just focusing on their biggest problems and talking about some of the thinking behind the tools and the techniques, and yeah, and just getting them to start buying into the logic
Mhm.
before sort of defending the solutions. Yeah, and yeah, I'd also add there that when I went into oil and gas, I did the experiment that I didn't even use the lean terms. So I went in
Mhm.
and yeah, after a couple of months, one of the managers would said to me about, when are you going to start teaching us lean? When are you going to start teaching us continuous improvement techniques? You're doing it. You've got your visual boards, you've got your routines, you've got your all in. So really, sometimes we human nature is we want the shiny stuff, we want the buzzwords, but lean when done right, I think, is just basic routines.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's a double edged sword where people might say, "Well, we don't want a lot of jargon," but and like you said, well, where's this branded kind of shiny sounding thing? I mean, do you find a term like continuous improvement was being more accepted than a word like lean or Japanese words like kaizen?
I think at the moment there's so many people and so many different views of what lean is, and lots of people will jump to kaizen and improvement, and they'll jump to mapping. That really, over the years, that lean has probably got a bad name. So in definitely some organizations, some sectors, there's a pushback on lean. Even some managers, they think lean is a cost cutting exercise. So that's how it comes across to the workforce. Whereas it's just, for me, it's just a way of thinking. It's just a way of thinking
Right.
and working. So sometimes, yeah, continuous improvement, I think, can land better with people.
Yeah, and you're right. Lean done badly or cost cutting done in the name of lean in a
Mm.
community can create a bad perception. I went into one health system and we started talking about lean and improvement, and one of the medical staff, I think it was a nurse, came over and talked to me and said, well, that her husband had been laid off from a major computer company, three letter name, and, she said, "Well, that was because of lean." And so
Mm.
I'm glad she at least came up and said something because it opened the door to at least to have the conversation about, well, that's unfortunate. That's not what lean is supposed to be. And, when I was working for J&J, our consulting group partnered with health systems to have a no layoffs due to lean commitment. But, at least she opened the door to that conversation, even if she didn't believe it right away.
Yeah, and that's some of the pushbacks which I've had. I've had that from employees. When you really get into it with employees, they see the benefits of not having to rush, not having to do
Mhm.
rework, and not having to do things the hard way and having stress
Mhm.
all day long and having managers on their back. But sometimes from leaders and managers themselves, you also get pushback on this lean stuff doesn't sustain itself. We did a project a couple of years back. We saved ourselves 200,000 or whatever, but it didn't sustain. Well, that's
That
not lean, and that's not the
Well,
fault of lean or continuous improvement. That's the fault of you didn't have a management system or routines in to sustain the gains and keep
yeah.
keep driving it.
I mean, it's fair to say, I mean, nothing magically sustains itself, right?
Exactly,
I
exactly.
mean if a new technology or a new approach is beneficial or helpful for people, they'll continue doing it. If it's making their work easier, safer, better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's for me. That's a large part of lean. A lot of people will jump to the improvement steps and kaizen, and then find out that either they haven't delivered the results or they can't sustain it.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it comes back to, well, you've got to have a foundation for improvement. You've got to have disciplines. Can't have management saying to the team, right, you guys in production, you go and do some lean or continuous improvement, and we'll carry on with our meetings. And
So
they're
have
really involved.
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't catch the
I
last.
said they've got to be involved. They've got to play
Yeah,
the game as well.
yeah. Over time, what you've learned, or what are you doing now, to create a better foundation? I hear you, you've said a couple of times, don't just jump right into improvement. Don't jump
Mm.
into just using tools. What's a better way in your experience to set that foundation?
Good question. I think that really comes back to these three common pitfalls that I kept seeing. This sort of drove me to write the book. Kept seeing wherever I went, whether it was startups or world-class organizations, I kept seeing that teams were not working on the right things. Improvement activity was not really delivering. And just day-to-day, teams were not delivering consistency. So the three pitfalls is basically that the teams apply the wrong improvement approach. Number two is that they suffer from, and they don't recognize that traditional management solution thinking is at bay. It's alive and well in the organization. And number three is the leadership routines.
Yeah.
So this improvement approach, many organizations say they want to get on the improvement bandwagon, or they want to do operational excellence or business excellence. They'll start applying kaizen, and they talk about PDCA. But for me, they don't understand. They haven't selected the right improvement approach for their business. If they want to sustain it in the long term,
Mhm.
you've got to think about DAMI and the 4 steps of DAMI and kaizen, which is define the standard, achieve the standard, maintain the standard, then improve the standard. And if
Mhm.
you want to, then add automation to streamline it further.
Yeah.
But most organizations, they skip the first steps. So then they start trying to improve when they haven't got robust standards in the first place, and they haven't got a system to maintain it, like daily management system or lean management system.
Yeah.
Even if you've got brilliant visual management, brilliant problem solving, different tools in the organization, if you've got this traditional management solution thinking in the organization, what you'll find is the visual management is allowing problems to breed and grow, so they'll get bigger. So the teams are
Mhm.
not solving the real underlying
Right.
problems. Problems will escape closer downstream to the customer. This way, a global coffee chain that wrote books on lean, that's got lean behaviors, they still run out of butter and jam and tea bags, and the dishwashers are breaking down every single day. And you see the same thing happening in aerospace, in financial service, in medical device. You're not having the right things and not having teams consistently perform.
Yeah.
So that traditional management solution thinking for me is the key to address that, and also having effective leadership routines to make sure that teams across the business are actually working on the right things. And then that, imagine an organization where every team is working on the right thing.
Sure.
That's some powerful organization.
Yeah. Well, as you were saying, in terms of, moving across industries, Darren, solving the right problem. So, if we go
Mm.
back to some of the luminaries you were citing earlier, I often think back to something Taiichi Ono wrote in one of his books, and I try to point people to that. One of the chapters, the header said, "Start from need," and
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
later in the chapter, Ono elaborated a little bit, like we should start with our most pressing needs, and like
Yeah.
in my experience, that's a better approach than people that might dogmatically really say like, "Oh, well, you should always start with 5S." Well, 5S might address a
Mm.
lot of needs, but in certain settings, that might not be the most pressing need for the business or for the team at that moment.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you that you've got to start with the main problem, start with the need. There's a lot of conversations about, with organizations to, what problem are you working on? So you've got lots of different businesses that are engaging in this now. That used to be that problems were seen as a negative thing. So now organizations are starting to see that problems are just a gap, an opportunity to improve. But some leadership teams, they still take 6 weeks to define their problem.
Mm,
To even work on the problem statement in the background, they need 6, 7, 8 weeks. It's just madness.
yeah.
That's one of my frustrations again, is that after hundreds and hundreds of years, we're still very poor at solving problems or even defining problems and what problem you need to work on.
There might be a balance to be found, between the idea, well, don't rush to solutions, don't jump to solutions, but let's not get stuck in analysis paralysis or talking about the problem. And I mean, I wonder, I mean, do you think that when you see that happening, is that people being hesitant to test a countermeasure that might not work? Are they afraid of being punished for trying? There might
Mm.
be, a lot of organizations talk about bias for action, but at the same time, they might punish people for taking quote unquote the wrong action.
Yeah, you do see that in some organizations, but you also see this in organization where the leader really wants it. And sometimes I think it's also people overthink it. And again, sometimes it comes back to they are trying to fill in a box, a problem solving box. And sometimes these English words and the translation from Japanese hasn't really come across. So they start trying to fill in a problem solving box, and they start going wider and wider and wider, and they hit the wall. So some of it for me is, when I see teams like that, sometimes it's not about asking them coaching questions, because sometimes you can't coach them if they haven't got a really good understanding of what they're doing. So sometimes it's going to a little bit of the thinking behind the tools, doing a little bit of awareness and teaching. And then once they've got that, letting them try that again. And usually they've got a far better effort then. And then you just coach them then and work through it. Work through that left side pretty quick, and then get into testing some countermeasures. And you want to tackle the more significant problem that the business has got, but sometimes leadership teams or management teams or frontline supervision and their teams, sometimes they're not in agreement on what that is.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got to pick something. You start with perhaps the most pressing need from a customer's perspective or a delivery perspective. But ultimately that's where the daily management, or I call it the lean management system, which is a collection of daily management systems, come in, which really should be helping the teams understand their own performance, exposing problems and working on the right problem.
Yeah.
It should be helping that alignment, should be helping every team know exactly what problem they should be working on. Sometimes I think we overthink it.
How do you find the balance between, kind of working on the most pressing needs, based on problems that could be defined as a gap in performance, and closing those gaps for the sake of the business? Like, starting point for an organization, this is especially true in healthcare. There might be hundreds, if not thousands of things we could be working on. And, there's that guidance to try to be strategic and solve problems that matter. There's also the classic Kaizen advice that goes back to Masaki Imai and Norman Bodek and others, that says, well, let people work on lots and lots of small improvements that matter to them.
Hmm.
And how do you find the balance, or have those approaches coexist in your experience?
Oh, it's a good question. I think there is a lot to be said of having people work on what they feel is important to them. But ultimately, you should also have facts and data. And if your visual management, your daily management system is showing you with facts and data that actually there's a pressing need, you should really try and coach your teams to work on that first, or have a separate team to work on that first. Because quite often, especially in organizations, complex organizations and organizations with long lead times, the improvement activity can be masked by the day-to-day problems, the underlying problems that they've got. So I think, quite often we've got to make sure that using facts and data, it is the right problem. And going back to the organizational issue again, I think this is more of a fractal approach, that really. Leaders shouldn't be thinking that, right, okay, improvement activity, business excellence activity, or operational excellence, that is for our frontline teams. And we've got a team of experts to facilitate that. I think it's a business-wide thing. It should embrace the management at every level. And really, when you think of it as a fractal approach, that every team, even the leadership team, has got a problem to solve. And taking that approach, you can break that down into what's the top one or top two. You can use that to get alignment as well through the business to make sure that teams are working on the right things. I remember I was working in a food business, quite a large food business, and the leadership team there was stressed. They were trying to get results. They worked hard, and I walked around the plant, and nearly all the metrics were green. So the frontline teams, the engineers, they were all pretty in a pretty good place. But that senior leadership team, they were under a lot of pressure, and largely it was because the problem, the organizational problem, wasn't rolling through. It wasn't the alignment. So it should go, for me, it should really go both ways. It should go from the work, and it should go from the business.
Yeah. And so maybe that ties into one thing I was going to ask you about, as you write about and you teach the idea that every business has 4 core or primary processes, that manufacturing or operations might not be the most pressing issue for a business, right? Tell us about those 4 primary processes.
Yeah. So the 4 primary process that I believe every organization's got. So first of all, the customer's got a problem. You've got a solution. So you've got to somehow pitch that solution to them. That's the sales process. Then you've got to develop that solution. So that's your new product development and introduction process. Then you've got an order, or you've got a patient. You've got to deliver that care, or you've got to deliver that service. That's the operations. And sometimes the product or service is offline, and we need to get it back online. So that's your aftermarket process.
Yeah, or it could be consumables and supplies related to the product.
Exactly. And the case and example is that years ago I worked for Sega. I worked on the sexy side of the organization with the gaming, the beat 'em ups, the motorbikes.
Yeah, and this is like big arcade equipment, not
exactly
home Sega Genesis. This is like you're actually physically on a motorcycle.
And that's it. And boy, did we have some fun and quiz games. But on the other side of the business, the consumable Genesis, they had something like 70% market share, but their new product development process was just too long. So Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony all came out with their offerings, and their lead time for new product development was much shorter. So they were developing better products with better features and better graphics faster. Yeah. And then Sega's market share went from 70 to 3% in a matter of 12 months.
Yeah, because I was of the era, like when I was in college, we wasted time building friendships, having fun, playing Sega Genesis, in particular sports game. And I worked at a store part-time for many years that sold those games. And Genesis was pretty popular. And then that next generation, nobody remembers the Sega Saturn. I think that was came out after Genesis, because Xbox, Nintendo came on the market. Other platforms, or Nintendo was already on the market, but their next generation. That might have been GameCube. Sorry, we're geeking out on games here, but you're right. Sega it's not a player in that market.
Yeah, and Sega scrambled.
Dreamcast.
They developed Dreamcast, which was a good product, but by then it was too late. They'd lost that, so they ended up reorganizing the business, and Sega does not make product anymore. They make software only. And you can look at that with BlackBerry and Nokia and So it's not just about operations and manufacturing and riding that wave. Yeah, you've got to be developing better products quicker. And if you think about Ferrari, and they don't invest in developing products, they go and pitch the product. Yeah, they go and pitch the product, and then when they know that they've got orders, then they'll start the development.
Yeah.
But obviously, they are developing with proven technologies in mind.
Yeah. And, back in the auto industry a couple decades ago, I don't know honestly how it compares now, but, the Japanese automakers were not just better in operations, but their product development cycles were faster than
Mm.
Ford and General Motors and Chrysler. And that's where, the lean product development movement, Jim Morgan and others
Yep.
who have been on
Correct.
this
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah.
we're focused on that piece of it because, you could, the one example going back to telephones is, building a defect-free rotary telephone was not going to be good enough anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's that executive level, back to your point, Darren, of, what's the most important problem to be solved for the
Yeah.
business.
And I think successful business that last decades, generations, they focus on each of these primary processes.
Yeah.
Toyota, they aftermarket care is brilliant.
Mhm.
Yeah. New product development, they're focusing on every single one of these primary processes. Yeah, but when you get into organizations, sometimes organizations will mix up these processes, and sometimes they'll mix them up with the secondary and tertiary processes, HR, continuous improvement, quality, and then they don't deliver what the customer really needs.
Yeah.
You need a balance of both. You need to deliver what the customer needs, and you need to improve the technical standards in the business.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk more, the acronym that you brought up earlier, DAMI, correct?
Yes.
And, defining the standard, like that can be a huge need in operations. And in my experience in healthcare, it's often been shocking of an undefined or poorly defined standard, is the starting point. And that, it's where sometimes people would talk about, instead of a PDCA or PDSA cycle, the need to start with standardize.
Yeah.
And that kind of parallel or foundational cycle. But I wanted to dig, kind of jump from that to talking more about leadership routines, daily management systems. It seems like there's a big opportunity around defining standards of, well, how do we lead? How do we manage? Be curious to hear more of your thoughts on that. Just first off, defining a standard, how standard does that standard need to be?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, completely agree with you. I think that PDCA is brilliant. It is the essence of problem solving, but ultimately there's a macro cycle, which is the DAMI: define, achieve, maintain, and improve.
Right.
Unless leaders understand that, they can end up driving improvement, and the improvement actions may not stick, or they may not get the results they need, when actually the process is not repeatable, or it's not even capable, and the standards are not there. So what I do, I don't push that there's a rollout of standards. I try and build it into the problem solving. So one of the key parts of the problem solving, whenever you look at the cause and you start investigating the cause, you should also think about the standards. What are the standards here? And for leaders, I believe that there's a couple of key routines that really need to be in place for leaders, and we can define the standards based, around those. Checking and embedding standards. If we don't check and embed standards, then problems will just come back. Variation will come back. So someone in the organization and leaders need to play their part, because it won't happen on its own. And we know this at home, with the house, with the car. We've got to maintain standards. So check and embed standards is a key part of the process. Just having that means a lot of the noise often goes away. Training people to achieve the standard. Quite often we will just say, come in, especially new managers, we just say, yeah, come in and just buddy up with someone, follow them for a few weeks, and there's not standards in place for management. So a different way of training. So there's some of the elements of training can be taught off the job with procedures or training presentations, videos.
Mhm.
Then obviously there's the on-the-job training and coaching. So who's your coach? And then there's an element of, right, okay, how are we going to deepen the standards and maintain that level of understanding? So checking embed standards is key. The big one for me is checking alignment.
Mhm.
Yeah, checking alignment. Making sure that each team understands that problem, or understands their performance, knows the problems impacting that performance. Either they are working on it or they're getting help in the business, and that perhaps leads on to another management standard, health chain.
Mhm.
And that is all about maintaining standards. That is all about maintaining standards. And some leaders might think, perhaps we don't need lean yet. It's not on our scope. We can't do it yet. Maybe next year or the year after. But each team delivering its best performance regularly surely should be something that is on everybody's agenda. And
Yeah.
that's what we really mean when we talk about problems and gaps. It's a gap to your best level of performance. And so that management routine to check alignment, it should just be a very simple act where you can go along to maybe a daily stand-up meeting or a tiered meeting, or even a report out session. And after the team has spoken, thank them for their effort. You thank them for whatever you learned from that discussion and their openness, and then ask them, would they mind if you check alignment? And then just run through a very simple process to check alignment to make sure that teams understand that performance, are working on those problems. And if they can't fix those problems, they're getting help when needed.
Yeah.
And I think that's half the battle.
Mm.
Then when we drive variation out, we can start applying kaizen and we'll have more time for it as well. But yeah, quite often teams don't do that. Leaders don't do that. Managers don't do that. And then what happens is variation breeds, and then we have problems that just roll up and end up taking up managers and leaders' time.
Yeah.
Trying to address these customer problems or people problems.
Well, and that's where I think, this idea of defining a standard is so critical. Having some stability in place, and I think it might be fair to say it's really hard to kaizen chaos.
You can try, and you'll be busy, but quite often you won't get the results.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
and the other thing I was just going to say as well is what you'll probably find is that you won't get much buy-in from your immediate managers. Yeah, because they will see that you're trying to work on something, but their problem is somewhere else.
Yeah.
Their frustration, their pain is somewhere else. So work on, as you said, to each his owner's point, work on the most pressing problem and need.
Right. The pattern or the desire or the appeal of trying to kaizen the chaos might remind people of the firefighting mode that they've maybe already been in. And that's something you write about, Darren. So I was wondering if you can kind of dig into a little bit around like some of the problems and the causes of why firefighting can be so attractive, and some thoughts on how to try to shift away from that of, being the hero gets rewarded in organization where stability and prevention sometimes doesn't get that same kind of attention and reward.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to human nature. We all like shiny new things.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll jump to these solutions. So it's part of this traditional management solution thinking. So quite often we jump to solutions rather than trying to really understand what we're doing. When you're under pressure, when you've got that operations management job or your senior management job or frontline team, everybody just wants to to try and help the business. They feel that the business is under pressure, and quite often they just want to help. But often that help is they are doing the wrong things.
Yeah.
And quite often it's masking the underlying problem. Toyota, perhaps some people don't like the automotive analogies. Toyota's got a system called stop, call, wait. And it's just brilliant. That if somebody is doing the work and following a best known standard, if they got an issue, then stop. Help will come. Yeah. So stop, call for help, and wait until that help comes and addresses that problem.
Yeah. And they're usually not waiting that long.
It's
They're a well-designed system.
Yeah, exactly. And the system is actually designed that the help must come. But in most organizations, the help does not come.
Mm-hmm.
So people have often got a choice. So it's often a habit that's created over a time that they don't have a system to call for help. If they call for help, somebody comes along and it's like, well, what do you want now? What do you want me?
The attitude might be right.
Yeah.
Something might arrive that doesn't look like help.
Yeah. So quite often then that, they don't raise these issues. Then, the people who actually get promoted, they get promoted for working hard or being technically good. Quite often they don't get promoted for building a team, pulling the team together to work on the right thing. And, you say you're Kaizen, you can't Kaizen chaos. I completely agree with you that, I think Kaizen's overrated. The majority of times, if you want results, it's not improvement activities, it's not streamlining the process. It's getting back to, well, have you got a capable standard that delivers what the customer wants? And are we maintaining that standard?
Yeah.
And quite quickly, you can actually get rid of the noise that is causing all of this chaos.
Yeah.
When you've got chaos, it's your management system's fractured. It's not working.
Yeah.
Teams throughout the business are not fixing the right problems. Otherwise, they won't keep blowing up.
Or they're not fixing the problem. They're getting past it. They're surviving the problem, and then the problem comes back another time.
Yeah. And it's quite often people think, right, I fixed that problem, but they haven't. They fixed it in that one instance for that project or for that customer. So the underlying problem is still there.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to people's definition of problem solving. I've got pushback in organizations where we say, well, one of the things that we're going to try to do here is improve more, and that means getting better at problem solving. And some people say, like, oh, we don't need that. We're already great at problem solving, but they're solving the same problem over and over again. So there's a different working definition of what a great problem solver means, what that means to be.
Exactly. And I think this is the value really of visual management. Yeah, because if you see the same problem popping up and you see the performance is not stabilizing or not improving, then you can look at what actions we've taken and then start realizing, there must be something else at play. And quite often, organizations and teams are, again, in the problem solving, they skip in the stages of problem solving. So they'll be very vague. They'll go from problem to action.
Yeah.
But they won't know that that's the right problem to solve because they've got no data behind it. And they haven't broken down the underlying causes, or they haven't put any quick fix containment action in. So they keep living with it. So they're often in this stage of, it's more of a solution or a corrective action to fix the problem in that one instance, rather than the underlying cause.
Yeah. Well, putting the fire out as opposed to preventing the next fire, preventing the first fire. This firefighting phrase comes up, and I've got an old friend of mine from high school who has been a firefighter in EMS in North Las Vegas, and I've gotten to visit with him at the fire station. And one of the things we talked through is, a very small percentage of a firefighter's time is spent actually fighting fires. They spend a lot of time doing education and inspections, and they do more actually to prevent fires
than
they do to fight
Yeah.
them.
So if you think about it, it's linked to the standard. Yeah. It's coming back to what standards that organizations should have. It's education and awareness to behave in a certain way so that you're not putting certain ingredients together. And then, yes, the audits, then the inspections, maintain the standard. Yeah.
Yeah, and those standards.
I had a master class last week actually, and we had a senior guy from the fire service here in Wales as well. And actually the topic of that master class was actually surviving and thriving, not just surviving. So it was all about getting out of the chaos,
Right.
getting out of the firefighting mode, and
Yeah.
so we had a few laughs with him as well because people just seem to do it in every single business, and it's just madness in this day and age.
And again, that's where, lean and, experiences, from people like you, Darren, is very transferable across industries. And, as we wrap up here, we'll talk about the book. Again, the title is Making Lean and Continuous Improvement Work. It's available now. There's a lot in here. There are healthcare case studies that caught my eye, including, the word transformation gets thrown around, but this example here of reducing the waiting time, referral to treatment time for certain cardiac procedures, reducing that by 88%. Maybe to your point earlier, like that was not just incremental kaizen, that was more of a reinvention or transformation of the work, right?
Yep. And that really was a mixture of solving the day-to-day problems, but it was also linked to the actual standard, the pathway was not capable anymore.
Yeah.
So we have to design the pathway, but instead of designing the pathway by trying to chase the waste, as we call it, the non-value added activity, because in a pathway or a primary process like that, it's 52 weeks. There's going to be a lot of non-value added activity.
Oh, yeah.
So rather than cherry pick the value added activity, we designed the pathway based on the value added elements, and then just tested it and just made it work. And that was an example that in a notoriously hard environment to change, we transformed it. And the national average was 24 weeks, and it's now that service is 6 weeks, and they've sustained it, and they put in far more procedures through. But going back to this, I think that every organization needs a system or a routine to make sure they're working on the right things or improving the right things. Quite a simple system. But ultimately, there's 3 things that leaders need to have. They need to have the right mindset. They need to be able to adopt a improvement mindset, a discovery mindset. They need to spend time on the right things. Otherwise, they won't create these new improvement habits. And then they need to start performing some of these leadership routines. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was sharing that example of the case study with another healthcare practitioner. And they said, yes, but what about, you can't just change things like that. What about the next part of the process? Wouldn't you cause a bottleneck? So you might, and you might have to go and fix that. But at the end of the day, patients or customers were waiting 52 weeks. Their health was degrading.
Yeah.
And now they're waiting 6 weeks, and they're getting treated, and they're in and out of hospital. And that's freeing up beds and saving time for other procedures. So, sorry, it's also linked to our traditional management solution thinking quite often puts up the defensiveness and gets into the solution and the blame.
Yeah. There's mindsets again.
Thanks, indeed.
Yeah. But, the other powerful outcome of that work, and this is, the power of lean in healthcare, reinventing the process and improving the value stream. It's reducing waiting times. It's increasing the number of cases per day. That goes hand in hand. And faster care has a dramatic impact. I think the numbers in the book was a reduction in mortality rates from 24% to 6%. That's quite
Yep.
literally life saving
Yep.
work. And I mean, the long term failure rate for all of us is 100%. But when you can defer that and have longer life with better quality of life, I don't know what's more important than that. So I'm glad you were able to share examples like that in the book as well. Of course, there's a lot there. On the cover, we see clean room sheet, clean room suits. We see hard hats. It's not a healthcare book. It's a book about
Yeah.
lean and continuous improvement. So I encourage people to check that out. Again, by Darren Walsh, Making Lean and Continuous Improvement Work. It's available, and I hope people will check it out. Anything that you'd like to add, kind of as a final thought, or something to leave us on?
The whole book was aimed at this problem that organizations and teams are not great at solving problems and not improving. Even when we got big organizations with world-class teams and awards, quite often they'll replace them after a few years and they'll start all over again. And this was all about trying to break down this mammoth problem of how do we make lean and continuous improvement work, and focus on the day-to-day and the routines, problem-solving, leadership routines. And really, I tried to take sort of fill it with case studies as well that are transformative case studies. 50% improvement in oil and gas, medical device, automotive, healthcare. These are not your 1, 2, 3, 4%. These are 50% or more. And I think that's the real power of lean and continuous improvement when it's done right and we're able to sustain it. So it's definitely helped me as well going through that process, refine my thinking. I'm already onto the second book. So
what's that going to be? Give us
it's going to delve.
preview.
I think it's just going to delve into these three common pitfalls again, and just look at some other sectors and delve into those and just trying to articulate those again as well. And I've been offering some discounted assessments. So if any organization wants to have an improvement assessment, reach out, and then that will help me also with the research, and I'll give feedback to the team there.
All right. Well, there'll be information linked to Darren's website and LinkedIn and different ways that you can contact him in the show notes. So Darren, congrats on the book being out there and helping people make this all work. Really appreciate you joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.